Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, the land between the rivers, it's where writing was born, where ziggurats rose from the plains and where farming transformed humanity forever. For decades, archaeologists believed the first settlers of Mesopotamia were local hunter-gatherers who evolved into the world's first farmers and builders. But what if that's not entirely true? What if ancient DNA reveals that some of the region's earliest inhabitants came from somewhere else? Could the foundations of civilization itself have been laid by outsiders? Before we start, I'm on a road to get 1,000 subscribers as a small channel. If you want to help me, please subscribe. Mesopotamia stretches across the modern landscapes of Iraq, southeastern Turkey, Syria, and parts of Iran. At its heart lies the rich floodplain between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, a place where agriculture, writing, and urban life first took shape. The traditional view of its history paints a smooth transition from mobile foragers to settled farmers, beginning around 10,000 BCE. These groups, adapting to the fertile environment, slowly built permanent villages, developed irrigation, and domesticated plants and animals. Over millennia, their settlements evolved into cities like Uruk and Eridu, launching what we now call the Ubaid and Sumerian periods. This view assumes a mostly local population, descendants of Paleolithic hunter-gatherers who had always lived on this land. But the archaeological record has long contained puzzling clues, foreign-looking tools, strange pottery, and early burial styles that don't quite match this local narrative. Until recently, the origins of these anomalies remained mysterious until scientists began extracting DNA from the bones. Long before the rise of iconic Sumerian cities, early Neolithic villages emerged across northern and southern Mesopotamia. Sites like Tel Hassuna, Yarmo, and Nemrik IX offer glimpses into this formative era, but hidden within these layers are artifacts and practices that don't align neatly with a local origin story. Pottery with unusual decoration techniques, architectural forms resembling Anatolian or Iranian designs, and foreign raw materials suggest outside influences or even migration. At some sites, cranial remains show skull-shaping traditions not seen among later populations, and some burial styles mirror those found in the Zagros Mountains or Levant. These clues point to possible early contact or movement of peoples across vast distances. For decades, scholars debated whether these features came from trade, imitation, or actual migration. Without genetic evidence, it was hard to tell. But with advances in ancient DNA techniques, scientists began digging deeper, this time not just into the earth, but into the genetic history hidden in ancient bones. And to uncover the genetic roots of Mesopotamia's earliest inhabitants, researchers turned to ancient remains recovered from early Neolithic and pre-Ubaid sites spanning from the Zagros foothills to the Tigris plains. Teeth and petrous bones, the densest parts of the skeleton, were sampled from individuals dating between 7,000 and 4,500 BCE. These samples were analyzed using hybridization capture techniques, which allowed scientists to retrieve genome-wide data despite the hot and arid climate that usually degrades DNA. The team then compared the Mesopotamian genomes with hundreds of others from across the ancient Near East, including populations from Anatolia, the Iranian Plateau, the Caucasus, and the Levant. The goal was to determine whether the earliest farmers of Mesopotamia were truly local descendants of Pleistocene hunter-gatherers, or if they represented an influx of people from nearby regions. The results didn't just challenge conventional thinking, they opened up an entirely new understanding of how the ancient Near East was populated. The ancient DNA revealed that some of the oldest inhabitants of Mesopotamia didn't match the genetic profile of local Pleistocene populations. Instead, several early individuals showed strong genetic affinities with Neolithic communities from the Zagros Mountains of western Iran and the highlands of eastern Anatolia. These groups carried genetic signatures distinct from indigenous Mesopotamian foragers, suggesting that farming and village life may not have emerged independently in the plains but were introduced by migrating populations. One cluster of individuals from the middle Tigris region displayed a genome profile strikingly close to early Iranian agriculturalists, while others leaned more toward Anatolian ancestry. This pattern suggests that Mesopotamia's earliest farmers were not a monolithic group, but a mosaic of ancestries brought together through movement and exchange. These people likely carried new crops, technologies, and ideas with them, kick-starting a process that would culminate in the development of cities and states. Civilization, it seems, had traveling founders. For years, archaeologists debated whether Mesopotamia's farming revolution came from within or was sparked by outside influences. The DNA now tilts the evidence toward migration. While some genetic continuity exists between local hunter-gatherers and later settlers, the overwhelming presence of foreign lineages in early farming communities suggests that migrants from the Zagros or Anatolia introduced key practices. These newcomers likely mingled with local groups, teaching them how to cultivate wheat, herd sheep, and build with mud brick. This model explains why new technologies and cultural forms appear rapidly and simultaneously across the region around 7000 BCE. The idea of cultural diffusion, ideas spreading without people, doesn't account for the deep genomic shift visible in the bones. Instead, it now appears that human movement, not just idea exchange, played a pivotal role in Mesopotamia's transformation. Civilization didn't just blossom in isolation on the fertile plains, it was seeded by people who brought their genes, crops, and customs from afar. Even as these migrant groups settled across Mesopotamia, they initially maintained distinct cultural and biological identities. Burial sites from early farming villages show differences in grave goods, positioning of the dead, and even cranial modification, subtle indicators of group identity and heritage. Genetically, these groups showed limited intermarriage with local foragers at first, preserving distinct ancestries for several generations. Over time, as settlements grew and merged into larger communities during the Ubaid and Uruk periods, genetic boundaries began to blur. But the earliest layers tell a story of separate groups living side by side, foreign pioneers and local peoples, each leaving their mark. The uniparental markers, mtDNA and yDNA, offered even more clues. Early Mesopotamian farmers carried mitochondrial haplogroups like N1A and K1, both associated with early Neolithic populations from Anatolia and the Iranian plateau. These lineages were rare or absent among local Mesolithic hunter-gatherers. On the paternal side, Y-DNA haplogroups, such as GG2A and J2, appeared, lineages linked to early agriculturalists across Western Asia. These markers confirmed that both maternal and paternal ancestry in the region's earliest farming communities had roots beyond Mesopotamia itself. As later urban populations emerged, more local and mixed haplogroups began to appear, signaling a slow integration over the following millennia. These ancient DNA findings reshape the foundational narrative of Mesopotamia's prehistory. Rather than an isolated evolution from local foragers to urban civilizations, the region appears to have been a crossroads, where migrants from neighboring highlands brought not just new crops and tools, but themselves. These early settlers weren't anonymous. They were farmers from the Zagros and builders from Anatolia, groups who carried their ancestral lineages and lifeways into the floodplains. Once thought to be a cradle that nurtured civilization independently, Mesopotamia now looks more like fertile ground where different waves of pioneers blended ideas, technologies, and DNA. The Sumerians, Akkadians, and Babylonians who followed may still be native to the land, but the land's first villages were seeded by newcomers. Civilization, as it turns out, wasn't simply born in Mesopotamia. It was adopted, adapted, and refined. This new origin story reminds us that movement and migration lie at the heart of even the most ancient societies. With each ancient genome, new questions arise. How far back does this pattern of migration go? Were there even earlier undocumented waves of people who shaped Mesopotamia's prehistory? Researchers are now expanding DNA analysis to lesser-known sites in southern Iraq, Eridu, and along the Diyala River, hoping to uncover the genomic profiles of even older inhabitants. More comparisons with early Levantine and Caucasus genomes could reveal missing links in this migratory web. Isotope studies may help track mobility patterns, who stayed put and who kept moving. And as sequencing improves, scientists may one day map how culture and kinship moved hand in hand across these ancient plains. The story of Mesopotamia is more layered than we imagined. Far from being a land where civilization rose in splendid isolation, the genetic evidence now shows it was shaped by waves of travelers, some from the Zagros, others from Anatolia, who came bearing seeds, tools, and traditions that would ripple across history. Ancient DNA has cracked open a deeper truth. Movement, not stasis, created the conditions for civilization. So what other founding myths might fall to science? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey into the genetic past, don't forget to like and subscribe.